Warrior. There is a moment every manipulator secretly fears. It is not when you argue with them. It is not when you get angry. It is not even when you confront them. The moment they truly fear is when you say nothing. When you stop reacting. When you stop explaining. When you simply observe them in silence. Most people believe power comes from speaking loudly, defending themselves, or proving their point. But the real power in social battles comes from something far quieter. It comes from controlled silence. Silence is the one weapon manipulators struggle to control. And once you understand why, you will start seeing manipulation everywhere. Today you are going to learn the hidden psychology behind silence. And by the end of this video, you will upgrade from version 1 to version 2. Version 1 reacts quickly. Version 1 explains everything. Version 1 tries to convince people, but version 2 operates differently. Version 2 observes. Version 2 controls information. Version 2 understands the game before making a move. Most people never learn this difference. But once you understand it, your entire presence changes. Manipulators depend on one thing more than anything else. They depend on reactions. Every reaction gives them information. When you become angry, they learn what triggers you. When you defend yourself, they learn what makes you insecure. When you try to explain yourself, they learn how you think. Each reaction becomes a small piece of psychological data. And when someone collects enough data about you, they can begin predicting your behavior. Once they can predict your behavior, they can influence it. This is why manipulators ask so many questions. This is why they provoke emotional responses. They are not searching for truth. They are searching for information. Version 1 does not realize this. Version 1 reacts automatically. He argues. He explains. He tries to prove his intentions. But every explanation gives the manipulator more material to work with. Version 2 understands something different. Sometimes the most powerful response is no response at all. Silence interrupts the manipulator's strategy. Without reactions, they cannot gather data. Without data, they cannot predict your moves. And without prediction, manipulation becomes extremely difficult. Warrior, if this idea is starting to make sense to you, type this in the comments. I see the game. Because once you see the game, you can never unsee it. Silence also creates psychological pressure. Humans are deeply uncomfortable with uncertainty. When someone speaks and receives no reaction, the brain begins searching for answers. The mind starts creating questions. Did I say something wrong? Why are they not responding? Are they angry? Are they judging me? What are they thinking? Silence forces people into their own thoughts. And when people are left alone with their thoughts, they often reveal more about themselves. Manipulators rely on controlling the emotional rhythm of conversations. They provoke, you react. They push again. You defend yourself. This rhythm allows them to guide the interaction, but silence breaks that rhythm completely. When you refuse to react, the pattern collapses. Now the manipulator loses control of the emotional pace, and the person who controls the emotional pace usually controls the interaction. This is why silence feels uncomfortable to them. It removes their ability to guide the conversation. Another powerful truth is this. Information is power. Every time you reveal your thoughts, your motivations, or your emotional triggers, you give others a map of your mind. Once someone understands your internal map, they know how to influence you. This is why highly strategic individuals reveal very little about themselves. They listen more than they speak. They observe more than they react. They allow others to expose themselves first. This does not mean they are passive. It means they are careful with information. Because once information leaves your mouth, you cannot take it back. Version 2 understands this deeply. Not everyone deserves access to your thoughts. Not everyone deserves access to your emotions. The less people understand your internal world, the harder it becomes to manipulate you. Warrior. If you understand this principle, comment this below. My mind is not accessible. Because protecting your mind is one of the greatest forms of psychological defense. Silence also reveals something interesting about many. When they cannot provoke a reaction, they start pushing harder. They repeat themselves. They change tactics. They attempt new strategies. And during this process, they often expose their true intentions. Version 1 reacts too quickly to notice this. Version 1 becomes emotionally involved in the moment, but version 2 watches quietly. Version 2 observes patterns, and the observer always sees more than the participant. When you observe people long enough, patterns become visible. You start noticing when someone tries to provoke guilt. You start noticing when someone tries to create pressure. You start noticing when someone attempts to control the narrative. Once you recognize these patterns, manipulation becomes much easier to detect. And once you detect it, its power weakens. because manipulation works best when it remains invisible. There is another hidden rule most people ignore. It is the rule of strategic scarcity. If people have unlimited access to your time, your attention, and your emotional energy, they begin to take it for granted. They expect quick responses. They expect immediate reactions. They expect explanations. But when your responses become limited and controlled, your silence gains value. Your attention becomes rare, and rarity changes perception. Scarcity creates importance. When your attention becomes scarce, people begin to respect it more. This is why silence is not weakness. It is controlled presence. You decide when to speak. You decide when to respond. You decide when to engage. And that control changes the power dynamic of interactions. Warrior. Drop this affirmation in the comments. I control my value, because the moment you control your attention, you control your presence. At the highest level, silence becomes more than a tactic. It becomes a mindset. Version 1 believes he must always respond. He believes silence means losing. He believes every accusation must be defended. But version 2 understands something deeper. Not every comment deserves a response. Not every accusation deserves energy. Not every conversation deserves participation. Sometimes silence is the clearest message you can send. It communicates boundaries without explanation. It communicates control without aggression. And it communicates confidence without noise. When people realize they cannot easily read your emotions, they start behaving differently around you. They become more cautious. They become more respectful. Sometimes they even become uncertain. Because unpredictability creates psychological distance, and psychological distance creates authority. So remember the transformation. Version 1 reacts instantly. Version 1 explains everything. Version 1 gives everyone access to his emotions. But version 2 observes first. Version 2 speaks only when necessary. Version 2 reveals only what is strategic. And when you operate like this, manipulators lose their advantage. Because they cannot provoke you, they cannot predict you, and they cannot control you. Warrior. Always remember this rule. Power does not shout. Power positions. And when people realize they cannot read your mind, cannot predict your reactions, and cannot control your emotions, you become extremely difficult to manipulate. You become calm. You become strategic. You become something manipulators avoid. You become untouchable.